Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Conversations in Pop Culture. And today we're taking sort of a different approach in this episode as I am speaking to Eduardo Rios, who is the creator and the writer and right now the artist, but that might sort of be up in the air on the comic Code Utopia, which is sort of still in process. So thank you for being on.
Oh, thank you for having me. Thank you so much for doing this, Andrew. I found it great to have the opportunity to talk to people that loves comics and getting to connect with more artists and people that may be interested in what I'm writing. So that's great.
So, first off, I kind of want to talk a little bit about Code Utopia because what is the basic premise? Because it's unique in that it's coming from a very different area of the world as well. Because you're not in the States, you're
Oh,
definitely more abroad and have that sort of accent too. Not to put you on the spot.
no, don't worry about it. Yeah, I'm from Chile, from the south part of Chile, but actually my comic takes place in the Amazon. Uh, That's what the story where the story begins, and it's like a different approach in the sense that I'm making the origin story for my character, and he's getting his powers through a psychedelic experience. So that's like a different approach for me. I don't know if there's any other heroes that gets his powers that way. I don't know.
So let's talk about that because your main character is Leonardo.
Yeah.
And clearly there's a lot going on because we're talking about the Amazon, and I don't know how many people watch YouTube and have seen this ad, and I don't know if you've seen this ad where this journalist has sort of uncovered this secret of the Amazon burning, and I think in Brazil, and it's a very interesting story, and it's sort of a little bit conspiracy oriented, but that's kind of the first thing that popped into my head when I saw this because clearly your character got his superpowers and has very much a spiritual awakening to some degree and has a moral awakening as well dealing with these corporations. So, where did these ideas come from? Because clearly a lot of stuff is being blended and thrown into the mixer, for lack of a better
Oh
word.
yeah. Well, the idea was born out of just inspiration. I got this idea of this guy that goes into the jungle and get a trip, an ayahuasca trip. I don't know if you know what is that. Yeah, and psychedelic experience, and he managed to get in touch with the hidden side of our human potential. That was the first part, and I couldn't get it out of my mind. It's like I always kept dreaming about it, and then I started to writing it down, and more came in, and I thought, okay, like maybe if we're in the jungle, maybe this guy can be have amnesia or something. Like we're starting out with nothing, just with our character and learning through the process. And the whole thing about the conspiracy theories, I think, is something that I always been interested in. I found it like so strange, like the hidden history of humankind and all thing that's been hidden from us. And a lot of the superhero mythology, I think, dwells into that aspect of things, like the secrecy of things that we're not getting. And yeah, and on the spiritual part also, I put that all in the mix because there's this all these elements that I really been interested in all my life. I found it like I can make a cool story about it, like a journey story from this guy, and this is just like the first tome, like the origin story. But then I have thought about like four more tomes to keep the story going. But yeah, it's mostly that.
And clearly, this is just the beginning of this story. Again, this is the origin story, and I'm sure it's going to expand, and you're probably going to go way beyond it. I just get this sense on that because everybody who I speak to says, "Oh, I'm only doing five. I'm only doing five," but we all know they go further. It's just the way some of us are built in this indie world. But one of the things that I like about this, and what I've heard about the story, and witnessing the process, and we're going to go into that in a second, is there is a big problem right now in South America and in particular with the Amazon. And I mentioned that YouTube ad with it being burned, and sometimes forest fires are necessary. There's an entire theory where sometimes trees need to be cut down so that new trees can grow in, but this is not that at all.
No, no.
And so, what is it like to really get to incorporate and highlight and bring attention to an issue that's actually occurring in the real world that's somewhat threatening the real world to some degree? Obviously, we're right now in the middle of COVID-19, which we're also going to talk about in a little bit, but this has definitely been happening for the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, totally. I found it awful what's going on. Like they're destroying the lungs of the world. They're destroying these tribes. And I got this news like I don't know 10 years ago. Like there were this logging process in the Amazon, and they were kicking off the tribes over there, and a whole tribe committed collective suicide because they were getting off their land. And I found it, I don't know, so shocking, and I wanted to incorporate that, like this process, but with another view, like we're winning this battle in my world, like, and maybe that will inspire people that have to start, I don't know, taking action and preserving what's ours actually. That jungle is for the whole humanity, and yeah, that's inspired me, the whole problem, and also the beauty of the landscape and the beauty. I never been in the jungle myself. I've been in Brazil, but in the south part. But I always been so intriguing about the Amazon, all the wild animals, and also I've seen a lot of documentaries about it and all the tribes and all the indigenous people there and their culture. I found it fascinating, and what I'm researching is now for the tribes is the Guarani tribes that are part of the border in Brazil, and yeah, maybe that what really got into me, like the connection with nature and the destruction of it is like a huge conflict, but I found it really interesting for storytelling.
And so clearly the origin, and I keep going back to the origin because that's the one we're starting off with, but there's a few more stories that are going to obviously come after this in this entire process. So I don't know how far the origin deals with these tribes, but clearly, at least with the origin, this is a big centerpiece. And is it going to expand outward? Because when we talk about superheroes and we talk about indie comics can be very large, they can be very on a macro level, they could be on a micro level. And I've had all sorts of people on this podcast who do both sides of the stories. So, what can people expect with this, and where this hero and his powers are going to lead him to with the other stories that are going to be told once we go beyond the origins?
Oh yeah. Well, first of all, I found it really hard to make the. I don't mean hard, but really challenging to make the origin story appealing. There are really cool origin stories, and I'm trying to make one of those. But the main thing is that we're in this learning curve. Like this guy is not like completely OP all of the sudden. Like he's learning, and he has a lot of problems with that because during his when he started to develop his abilities, he's starting to, I don't know, to freak out. He's like a weakness at some degree, and he started to become separate from humans at some point. So he started dwelling with that. He started to, what it has to do in the next episodes. It has to do more with the recognition of that we have previous lifetimes and all the reincarnation part. So he's dwelling with all this, and he's overwhelmed with this. But during his learning process, he's going through different adventures. For this part, he's dwelling through this company that's destroying the Amazon. But in the second part, he's moving on, and he's learning about himself. He wants to return home, but in the process, he has to go through other tests, other battles.
And so I want to table it right there as far as talking about the story side, because I don't want to ruin too much, and it's still in the writing process. But I do want to talk about that other side because for most people that I interview, I actually do not get to talk about this because we're focusing on the actual story. And a lot of people have it done or they have their first issue done, and you are in the process. And I think that's so fascinating. So I'm very curious because you mentioned learning curves for your character. What was that like really getting just jumping into writing? Because comic book writing and creating is a very different medium than writing a novel and doing a movie and doing a play. And I read a lot of articles about this stuff, and it's very different even in that style of just writing, and even an interview that I'm doing right now. And I'm using some
Oh,
notes that I have on my computer and questions that I'm using, but that's a very different writing style in its own right. So I'm really curious what was that like to really familiarize yourself and bang it out? Because I would imagine there's a learning curve for you as well as your
oh,
hero.
totally, totally. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm part of the journey. But for me, it was like I got this inspiration. I started to writing it down, but I was doing other stuff in the meantime. I was I was studying 3D animation, and in the meantime, I was trying to write down the whole key points in the first part of the story, like what this origin story would be like, and all that stuff. And I had my first draft ready, and I thought I can wait till I can finish all this stuff, like I finish all the process and then start sharing with people. And I thought maybe I can share the process all together, like I started going step by step. I already finished the first act clean. I'm gonna launch a video about it this week. But for me, it's like I always been into storytelling, writing. I have reading about the whole structure of stories, because there's something in common about the films, animation, and all the medium that will try to tell a story. It's way back beyond the creation of mythology, And you know what? I always have this sense of visualizing things. I'm a very visual person, and I just wanted to get together two things that I really love, and that's illustration and storytelling. And I found that to be a great medium, and I thought it's a great way to showcase your stuff if you have artwork and all that stuff. But I thought maybe I can jumpstart and start sharing with people what I'm doing. Some people may be interested. There are some people that are actually interested in what I'm doing, and I found that great because they they are interested in a promise that this will come to fruition into something that they will read and enjoy. And that's mainly it. I wanted to share the whole process, and it's going to be a learning process for me as well, for sure.
So,
I've seen some
so,
of your interviews that you have these guys that already written many stories. They've been to the Comic Cons and all that stuff, and I found it great. And I'm just starting out, but you know what? I like this story myself, and that's the key part, I think. If you like it yourself, maybe someone else will like it, will appreciate it.
so let's talk about that because you put out a few things on YouTube and you're putting out a lot more. So, what has that been like, and what feedback have you received? Because one of the things that people tell, and on my main podcast, people say this all the time as well when I ask them for advice and public advice, is a bunch of people say, "Oh, put things out there and see how people respond to it." And so, what has that been like? Because that's a very scary step for a lot of people,
Totally.
whatever you're doing in life. I published about 120 interviews for those who don't know. And the first one was one of the hardest things to publish, and even the first 10. And even this is very difficult to do and publish. And it's very nerve wracking. So I would imagine that just even putting out a first draft of something saying, hey, how is this going and what is this like and what do people think? So what has that been like? Because indie comics, from my experience, people tend to be very supportive in that sector.
Oh yeah, I've seen that in some of the Facebook groups that are really supportive. But as you said, it's a hard process to put yourself out there, to start sharing your work. It's like a really scary process. But you know what? And usually the writers are introverts and artists as well. we don't like to share so much and all that. I don't know what we're scared of. Like, but I get it though, because sometimes in Facebook I have like, I don't know, a lot of people telling me good stuff about what I'm doing, and I have one hater, and it just, I don't get it. Like, why are you being so negative about the stuff? I'm trying to make something for everyone to enjoy and have fun, you know. But some people are just, I don't know, they haters gonna hate, you know. But you just have to put on a very thick skin and don't mind and keep on going and doing your stuff. And for me it's been like that in YouTube. Well, I always do that. Like I make the same video in English and in Spanish. If I knew any other language I will do it as well. but but yeah,
So
some
what
people
is
really
that
like.
like to do that? Because that's interesting in its own right, and maybe it's my own ignorance when I say this, but I've noticed that you make the exact same video both in English and in Spanish, and obviously you're from originally from South America. I don't know if you're still in South America. Not exactly
Yeah.
sure, but that's interesting because that I don't see a lot on YouTube. You know, I don't do that when I put stuff up on YouTube. Um, I don't know Spanish. That's probably part of the reason, but there's a whole
Well,
different. But even
you should.
still,
You should. You're on the States. You should learn some Spanish.
it's on my to do list. Let's leave it at that. But that's interesting because that definitely expands your viewership to some degree. It also allows a lot more access because comics, and I guess this leads me into another question as well, is that comics and Marvel has had variants for Mexico, and they've had international variants in different languages, and some people collect those. And so, when you publish your comic, is that going to be something that's on the table as well?
Oh, totally. If it was for me, I would like to have my novel translated in all possible languages. That would be a dream come true, like being published in several languages.
And so to even talk about that other side of the business because it's fascinating, all this stuff, and because I don't get to talk about this, I really don't, and that's why this is so interesting. Is how you even got into like printing costs and looked into any of that yet, and payment systems and shipping costs, or is this all too early for all
No,
this?
I think it's way too early to start worrying about that. My goals are finishing the writing process. That's my main goal. I And that's the other part. Going back to your previous question about getting yourself out there, it's like for me, I would be happy to go into a cave and start writing and writing and writing because I love to write. That's my main gig, I think. I love that part, writing and writing. But you know what? I have a pile of things that I never show to anybody, and that's the main reason that I wanted to share this from the get-go. But for me, it's one step at a time. Like I'm getting to know some of the more experienced artists. I send an email to Anthony Johnston, because I was learning from his process. He has a website, and he said, "Okay, good luck with your thing, and thumbs up, you know." And I think that's great. Like this platforms where you get to see it and to learn from the people that gone through this journey to start publishing, you know. And I know that that crossed my that thought crossed my mind, like trying to get an agent, trying to get an editorial and all. But first things first, I just want to get the word out there, what I'm doing, get a channel going, and I'm dividing my time into making videos and writing the novel and showing the process. That's my main focus right now.
And then the other side, and we spoke a little bit before, just so everybody knows. So I have an idea what your answer is, but I just want to full transparency is the art side. And right now you're sort of the main artist, and you're kind of spearheading that component. But I am curious because that's a big thing in indies, and since we are speaking about the business side, what has that been like? Figuring that entire process out and drawing, and even potentially reaching out to an artist and bringing them in and getting that thing kind of address? Because that must be in the back of your head while you're creating, saying who would be a good fit, whether even it's just for a cover for your comic and what you're doing, or even some interior page works, or even colorists or letterists and things like that. You must be thinking about that to some degree.
Totally. I think that I on Instagram I follow a lot of artists that have so much talent. I've seen this some guys that make awesome covers and awesome drawings, and I found that the colored part is like my weakness. I know I can do it, but it would take me forever to do it. I can draw. I love to draw, but again, it will take me so long. And the writing, I have no issue with that part. For some people, it's the easy part. I don't know about that. For me, it is. It's quite easy. But what I'm doing for now, since I don't have anyone on by my side working in this, it's like I'm writing, and every page, every panel, I just do a sketch to lay out all the layout of the panels, and do a quick sketch of how you will be seeing every panel. That's kind of time consuming, but in the end it's really great because you get the sense of how the comic will look at the end, so that's really helpful. But then to get to polish the drawings and start inking and all that, if I do it by myself, it can take me I don't know, a year or something like that. Then if I get the attention from an editorial or something that would like to get me going faster and all, then I will need help for sure. For sure, I cannot do it all by myself. But for now, for this part, I can manage.
And then we're going to table that, because I do want to talk about one more thing that's going on, and I'm very curious, and I've been asking a lot of people this, and this is going to be interesting for me on my side because I deal with a lot of people in the States, but how is COVID-19 affecting you? And I don't know if you go to conventions, and I don't know what South America looks like out as far as the con scene goes collectively. And I'm not exactly sure because I'm not as familiar with international cons and conventions and the comic scene collectively beyond the States, and even a little bit of Britain and the UK I know a lot about. But beyond that, I'm very ignorant on it. And so I'm very curious how COVID-19 has affected your creativity, has affected you as a person, as well as it has affected the comic industry where you are, and the entertainment sector as a whole, and conventions, and everything else that falls under that branch.
All right. Well, first, it affected me deeply in all my plans. It completely changed everything. Last year, I was in Vancouver. I was finishing my 3D animation course. I was applying for an internship in Sony Image Work, and I came back to Chile just to spend the holidays with my family. And then these things broke loose, the whole COVID. And it was crazy for me. All the borders closed, and I thought, okay, the best part that I feel really blessed is that I'm able to be with my folks and be safe. And my brother is in Germany, my sister is in the capital, so we keep in touch. But for me, as like my career, I had to hit pause and think, okay, where am I going now with this? First, before this whole thing broke loose, I was already putting some videos out there. I was working and all, but this was like my sidekick. Like I wanted to do this while I'm getting a job in animation. That was my idea, my plan. And then these things happened, and I thought, okay, maybe this is an opportunity for me, like to really focus on my craft and get my mind off this whole mess. Actually, my next video, I will talk a little bit about this. Like you need to stay focused on your craft. Like you need to keep on going, and don't be despaired about this whole mess going on in the world. I know that it's a great instance for indie comics to start sharing, because a lot of people need some entertainment, need some good stories to, to keep their mind off this tragedy that's going on in the world. But in Chile, it's been really crazy. Like at some point, we were really one of the countries with the lower amount of people getting infected, and then the thing start growing here. The whole comic industry, we don't have actually an industry here, but there's a lot of conventions and all that, so everything stops, like the world stops for everyone. So a lot of people are really scared about it. I've seen it. I have another, I don't know, vision about it, like you have to find yourself inward, go inward, getting to know yourself, and if you're a creative person, you need to do what you do best, and that's creating.
And to even go off of that, and I know he's going to hold your feet to the fire, and I've been asking everybody who's been on, and I'm going to continue to ask everybody who's been on, how do you think that the comic world, and in particular the indie comic world, and even the con scene is going to change due to COVID-19? And I don't know how familiar you are with the con scene in particular, but definitely the indie scene, which you're a part of. How do you feel that that's going to change due to COVID-19?
Oh yeah, I think sadly at some point, but it's a good opportunity because people are looking for different stuff, for different. There are a lot of people that really love the MCU or the DC universe and all. They're starting to, I don't know,
Get fed up
look
with it.
for.
Get fed up with it.
I don't know if they're fed up with it. Well,
Sick of
some
it,
people are.
annoyed,
Yeah, I
stale.
know. They're making some really strange decisions in those universe right now.
Stale is a good one. I mean, let's be realistic here. I'm not gonna lie. Thor 4 looks like an odd movie. It could be really good or it's gonna be really bad. It's gonna be one or the other. I'm hoping it's good. Okay, we look at phase. What are they on? Phase 4. I mean, Phase 4 is looks. It's either going to be the best thing they've ever done,
Yeah,
or it's going to be the worst thing they've ever done, and there's nothing in between collectively. And
yeah.
I know people are going to cut this and take this out of context, but the reason why I asked this to everybody is because to me, indie comics are starting to gain traction, and they're
Oh yeah,
starting to attract a huge amount of people. And I include parts of Image in there as well, because Image is sort of a big company, but it's also creator owned, and it's kind of on that indie scene a little bit. But it's starting to gain a lot of traction in a lot of ways, and so I'm just curious where you think it's going because we were talking about it and we mentioned the Facebook groups. Those things are growing and clearly, I mean, you also stated, and I'm going to put sort of you in a position a little bit, but that you've taken this opportunity to really build this comic out and start building it out. So I'm just really curious, and sorry to interrupt, but I'm curious about all of that and where you think this is going in conjunction or without conjunction with the big guys, because clearly there's changes occurring.
oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the indie scene is growing in a really fast pace. I mean, you said it. You said about Image. They're putting so much new stuff out there. A lot of new stories. It's amazing what Todd McFarlane is doing there. It's but that's what I think is gonna grow. It's gonna grow and keep on growing. And if we can manage to get ourselves out there in the right moment, maybe we can explode with this whole momentum and getting a lot of attention. That's the main part, because getting an audience is the main part for it. Getting people interested in what you're doing is that feedback really gets into you, and you start working more and working more motivating. And but I seen it also in Instagram, like a lot of artists making their own stuff, and some of it looks so cool, so polished, so like They are from very big editorials and all, but they are just guys doing their stuff, being really crafty about it, and I think it's a great moment. All this problem is awful and all, but it offers a great opportunity for independent artists to grow and to showcase their work to all these people that need something to get their minds off this trying times that we're dealing with.
And let's talk about getting you and building out your audience a little bit, because where can people find you, and where can people support you, and where can people follow the progress of this comic and your journey in building it out and then eventually publishing it?
Oh yeah, well, I would love to say that you can find me in all social media, but the truth is that I'm more comfortable in YouTube. I know the importance of being out there in all platforms. I even got my Twitter account the other day, and I hate Twitter. I found it the worst of all. I'm sorry, but, and also in Facebook. You can find me on Code Utopia. That's the name of the channel on YouTube and on Facebook as well. I also have an Instagram account. I haven't really put it in the works there, but that's one of my goals, like getting in all possible platforms to getting people to get to see the videos. Sometimes people hate the thumbnails that I put on, but then they see the videos and say, oh, okay, that video was quite good. Uh, but mostly on YouTube. You can find me on YouTube, and the way you can support me is just giving me likes and subscriptions and sharing the work like any other social media.
Well, I think we're going to table it there, and I'm just going to say it as I've been always saying it. Support is not just economics, and the book's not out there yet, and eventually it will be, and you can follow the journey. And this is a prime example that this is extremely important to go and subscribe, like the video, comment on the video, share the video in a Facebook group, share the video on Twitter. Just because you don't have a Twitter doesn't mean that it can't be shared there and it can't get traction there. And if there's enough traction on Twitter, maybe you'll go create a Twitter to respond to some of that attraction. That's the
Oh, I
goal
made a
here,
tweet.
everybody.
I have one post, I think, in Twitter.
But kidding aside, in all seriousness, this is so important because one of the things about YouTube, and I used to be on YouTube very actively for all those who are watching and listening and watch this entire thing through, that it does matter about algorithms. Algorithms are so important to watches, the amount of time somebody's watching, likes versus dislikes, comments, and especially given that that's your main platform. I encourage everybody, if you're interested or you're convinced or you want to go on that journey or you want to go and write a comic and you want to go do something in the indie world, this might be a really cool place to start. And so, because I've watched a bunch of this stuff and I recommend it, and it's also free, and it's only knowledge, and it can't hurt you, and you could be listening to it, watching it while you're doing something else, or just kind of spacing out because you absorb knowledge that way anyway. So that's something just to keep in mind. So definitely subscribe, share it, comment, because that helps the algorithm and it helps actually get it into more people's hands. So thank you for being on. Is where we're gonna stop.
Yeah, that's really helpful.